Well, I think in terms of what ISIS, how they interpret Islam, and I think how the majority of Muslims in the world interpret Islam, is really they don't really belong in the same room. What you have is ISIS that has shrouded itself in a certain way they dress, or having beards and making themselves to be look religious and to be able to quote certain verses of the Qur'an as a way to mask their thuggery and their terrorism and their barbarity, and using that to oppress and intimidate people. So that concept, or those methods and those tactics that they use, are outside of the bounds, like I said before, of not only Islam, but they're outside the bounds of humanity, and what human beings really, outside the bounds of anything rational and normal. ISIS represents a culture of intimidation and violence and death, whereas when we're talking about the faith of Islam, we're talking about a culture of God consciousness and life and mercy and peace and justice. So nothing could be more antithetical than the culture and the ideology of ISIS and the ideology and the faith of Islam, that serves as the basis of really peace and faith and for billions around the world. To a person who is looking to join ISIS, I would say that you are encountering something where you may be looking to do something larger than yourself, seeking to work for the faith of Islam, but you are about to fall into a trap. Not just a trap for yourself, but for others. ISIS it has twisted the verses in the Qur'an, has made certain things that are anathema to Islam look attractive. They are doing the devil's work, in my opinion. And so what you find in ISIS is something that will be cause you great harm, will take a lifetime to mend in your heart and in your soul, and it is the path that will lead to destruction for yourself and others. You're seeking to do something larger, you're seeking to do something bigger. That's a struggle that needs to be continued, but it is not found, the answer for that is not found in ISIS at all. I would encourage you to go to a mosque and to go talk to people who are actually building, who are actually creating, who are actually doing good in this world, and partner with them instead. The current living situation of men and women in ISIS, from all accounts we hear in the media, is like so many dictators, and history tells us before, the higher up in the echelons, I'm sure, live very well, but the people who are on the ground, for whatever the organization are, live like animals. And certainly for ISIS's view of women, the oppression of women, the oppression of men as well, you cannot find any good in what they're doing. And living conditions wise, there are people who have gone and joined ISIS who have again gone with an ideal, found something to the contrary, were actually mistreated, were actually brutalized, and had to extricate themselves. So you're not joining the nicest organization in the world, let's put it that way. So my thoughts on the current status of social status of American Muslims is that we are strong, we are contributing, we are vibrant, we are a mosaic of ethnicities and cultures. We are helping grow this nation. in so many different ways. How does the media portray us? One may think that, when you see a Muslim, or when you see somebody wearing, a woman wearing hijab, for example, that there is some sort of oppression, or there is some sort of tendency or leniency towards violence or terrorism. Again, nothing could be further in the truth. So you have this dichotomy, or this whole gap between what you sometimes see portrayed in the media and what the reality is on the ground. The reality on the ground, again, is that Muslims are a vibrant, contributing, growing part of this nation, practicing their constitutional rights, contributing to what this nation has been, and what it will be in the future. And I honestly believe, I say this as an American and as a police officer as well, that this nation is better for having American Muslims as part of its fabric. How would I like to individually improve the social status of American Muslims? I think when we talk about improving the social status of American Muslims, I think along at least two different things. Number one, American Muslim children. The reality is that for Muslim children who are going to public school, or in other aspects of their lives, they have to interact with and deal with people or young kids who they themselves are influenced by their households about who Muslims are. So, for example, it is not uncommon to hear about a girl who maybe has decided to wear the headscarf and be called a terrorist, or be called somebody who is, something other derogatory term. They face the challenge of bullying, and that is a terrible thing. It isolates and it stigmatizes, and that is one of the things that I hope and pray and will work for improving upon. The second thing is for American Muslims, one of the key, we are in effect a reflection of America. What I mean by that is that when you talk about Muslims, you're not talking about an ethnicity, you're not talking about a culture, you're not talking about a race. You're talking about all the colors and stripes and mosaic of humanity. So there are African American Muslims, there's white Muslims, there are Hispanic Muslims, there's, of course, immigrant Muslims from abroad. And so we are, a sort of a reflection of the United States. And along those lines, if Muslims can find in their faith the ability to come closer together across those cultural and ethnic lines, you will strengthen not only the American Muslim community, but you'll strengthen America also. Oh, well, I think American Muslims in the political realm are a increasing part of America's government, and establishing or creating policies, and working with our government. So, in other words, that they are an emerging, small but growing group that is involved in bettering our nation, whether that be through becoming elected officials themselves, or working as staffers in Congress, or on the local level, in whatever capacity. You see Muslims becoming a part of what our nation is in terms of our government. So I think in that regard, we are a small but growing part of government. As far as an entity that lobbies the government or what have you, look, I don't think Muslims have a specific agenda right now, in the sense that we don't have a specific cause, but what we have is really, as far as I'm concerned, we are here for the betterment of America as a whole. Our economic policies, our social policies, our foreign policies, it affects us as Americans. So we don't have that single cause for a foreign nation, or a cause for a specific issue. I think Muslims in general want to see a better America, and so that's where you see Muslims involved in so many different aspects at an organic level throughout our government. I think our fellow Americans who are not Muslims, if they want to help uh, American Muslims, is to educate themselves, learn about what our faith actually is, learn about what our community, who our community is, and who we are comprised of. Uh, I think those are two key things that can be done. I think it is important to resist the temptation to fall into stereotyping and to sort of believing the sensationalism that you hear in certain parts of the media. I think those are the key things that can be done at this point. Well, I hope that in my lifetime or in my children's lifetime, this uh, concept of Muslims and who are Muslims and do they, how do they feel about ISIS or some terror group or whatnot. To be honest with you, I hope that all goes away. I hope there is the realization at some point in the future that Muslims and Islam are ordinary people, that they're part of the mosaic of humanity, that they're here to do good in this world as commanded by the Qur'an and to avoid what is wrong. And that sort of this view of Muslims as sort of being outside or esoteric or an enigma. No, that has to be researched and discovered and find out who they are and what they're all about. And I hope it comes to a point where, just like African Americans or Hispanics or whites or whatever, Muslims are just a part of humanity and who we are as Americans.